everybody, it's Josh with Talk About Trek, and we are back again today to talk about Trek. In this case, a trek through Double or Nothing, which is the fifth book in the Double Helix saga, and in my mind, my favorite book so far of this saga. And I'm not just saying that because I'm a huge Peter David fan. It was a blast. It was a wild ride, and it was. And actually, there's a big part of this too that is because of how I read it. I was able to sit down and finish up, I don't know, maybe a good 100 pages in one sitting, which was the exciting conclusion of the book. And that's awesome. That always is nice when you can sit down, devote a good hour and a half to really just sit down and pound through it and really get involved with the story. Basically, we finished this one in a week, so I'm pretty happy with that. We just started it last week on the 3rd. And again, this is a Peter David book, and as part of Book Trek this year, we are going to be reading basically all of the Peter David books that I haven't read yet. But we'll get into that later. Right now, we're going to get into Double Helix. So from the cover, you can see here you've got Picard and you've got Calhoun. And Picard and Calhoun unite to face a threat that has spanned the galaxy. Like a lethal bacillus, which is a bacteria, coursing through the bloodstream of the galaxy, a fiendish master plan has spread death and terror across the 24th century, until two heroic captains risk everything to stamp out the evil at its source. For more than a decade since the very beginning of the Starship Enterprise's mission, unknown enemies have unleashed a string of deadly biological weapons throughout the Alpha Quadrant, inflicting ghastly epidemics upon the Romulans, the Cardassians, the Bajorans, and even the Federation. Now, at long last, Captain Jean-Luc Picard joins forces with Captain Mackenzie Calhoun of the starship Excalibur to track down and confront the hidden architects of the plagues and avenge the deaths of thousands. Right? Alright, so very exciting stuff. If you've been following along with the Double Helix saga, basically it's been a series of, interconnected, not connected stories, only connected through the fact that each book had to deal with the virus at some stage. And they made it clear in the beginning that somebody was basically experimenting with this, trying to refine it and get down to this very perfect virus for some nefarious purpose, right? Which we have just now discovered in Double Helix. So, now let's see if we can't learn a little bit more about Double Helix from the wonderful book about books here. So we'll consult the index first off, find our page number, which is going to be 437 to 438. So of course this is Voyages of the Imagination. And we can see if we can't get an inside look here into the writing of Double Helix. So, coming to page 437. Okay, alright, here we go. Okay. So it's got a little blurb here. This is published August 1999. This is 277 pages. The cast of New Frontier joins forces with the Next Generation crew to stop the scourge responsible for the plague in the previous books. Captain Calhoun goes undercover as a rogue Federation operative and discovers the key to the puzzle is buried in his past. For Captain Picard, the villain has an even more personal vendetta. The end result will have huge ramifications for everyone, especially the crew of the Excalibur. When asked, Peter remarked, I have no recollection of this book at all. End quote. So no inside look today at at Double or Nothing by Peter David. So I tell you what, I will give you my inside look at Double or Nothing by Peter David, and it was just fun. Reading Peter David, and especially reading Peter David's New Frontier books, is a lot like reading, and this was brought up to me before, and it made perfect sense when it was brought up. The New Frontier series is like reading a comic book in book form. So you have these larger than life characters, you have these, crazy situations going on, you have a lot of characters, a lot of different things going on, and that's what you get with this, right? It starts out fairly simple, right? You get a one of those 7 year earlier things. You get a kind of an early mission of Mackenzie Calhoun as he goes in and he rescues this Orion girl. Uh, well, he wasn't actually sent in to rescue her, but it was just part of the mission, and he was able to save her as well. So, but then, and then it just kind of, again, it turns into this huge, crazy story where you've got all these crazy characters. I'll give you let's just start right at the beginning here. So the book introduces right in the first chapter, in the kind of the 7 year earlier segment, Zolan Darg, and basically they introduce him as like the chief scum of the universe, right? He's got this Orion lady captured. He was so enthralled with her that he's now determined to completely break her down as a person and then rebuild her as like whatever he wants, right? So like immediately they're like putting him in front of you and saying, look at this dude, he is scum, right? He is scum. So in that opening, I guess we're going right into the spoiler talk of the book. So if you don't want to be spoiled, just go now and read the book and then come back and we'll talk about it then. But right. So Mackenzie goes in there, and typical, like I liken him to John Carter of Mars, right? Just your basic kind of superhero, superhero but not a superhero, right? Your basic like, he's everyone. He's John McClane, all your action heroes kind of tied together, right? You're your perfect action hero guy, your perfect comic book hero guy. And he goes in there, he saves the day, he rescues the girl, he blows up Zolan Darg's tower, the tower lands on Zolan Darg, and basically kind of ends with him like, curse you, Mackenzie Calhoun, I will get you someday, and then you get like, you jump right into like these little fun scenarios. The very first chapter is this dude, Elias Frobisher, and it is his 43rd birthday today. And he's woke up especially excited because he previously worked at the Guardian of Forever, where at the Guardian of Forever he saw his own future, and in that future he saw that he would die on his 43rd birthday. So he's thinking that he's made it past the time. There must have been some kind of mistake. When the whole time I'm thinking too, I'm like, oh man, there's gonna be some kind of time thing going on here. And it's really, today is the day, right? And that's totally how it works out, too. It turns out the assistant for him was kind of tampering with the machine in an attempt to let some of the bad guys in, right? Anyway, he's working at Daystrom, working on the Omega 9, which is this AI computer thing. So basically the computer can connect to you, and then you can instantaneously be inside and be making decisions and doing things at the speed of a computer, right? So the place is compromised, and in walks in Zolan Darg and his crew of like crazy sidekicks. Like one of them's a snake man, one of them's like a Creole or something. There's just, imagine just like this ragtag crew of different aliens, right? Which is awesome. Which is one of the things that I love about this book. And they kind of lean hard into all these different kind of tropes. I don't know. Just, comic book tropes of this dude and his crew of sidekicks, And at this point in the story, he looks a little bit different. He's a bit beefier. He's a bigger guy. So there's something going on there. Okay, all right. So then from there, all right, we introduce this guy and his crew, and he basically gets control of this Omega 9 device, kills Elias Frobisher, and runs off with the assistant who was the betrayer there, right? So then you jump to the Excalibur. No, not the Excalibur yet, the Independence. And this is a ship that is transporting Commander Riker to basically like I don't know if they said it was a bicentennial, but a celebration of the Federation's initial forming or something, right? So he's heading to that thing when they get attacked by a group of nasty Romulans, right? And they have to abandon ship, and right in the end, it's revealed that Sela is the one that is in command of this mission, and then she gets to say what she's always wanted to say, fire at will, as she targets Will's escape pod. And again, look, it's just so fun. There's such fun, silly stuff in this fire at will. Like, come on, that's wonderful, right? So anyway, there's a lot more that goes on Independence in that chapter. Even a funny joke about brown pants, which I liked. But you know, we can't stick to everything, right? We've got to keep it on moving through the story and let you guys discover some of those things by yourself as you go back and you read or reread this book, right? Because there's a lot more yet to cover. So basically, next chapter, rescued last minute by Shelby, Calhoun, and the Excalibur. They blaze in, they save everybody, they scare off the Romulans, and I think they're able to, just save not all of the crew. The Romulans were actually targeting and blowing up some of the escape pods, but they saved a good amount of the crew, and they bring him on board the Excalibur. Now, so far in this story, suspiciously absent has been the lead character from the cover, Captain Picard. Not really shown up yet. So, keep that in mind. Now, very fun scene here where Admiral Nechayev calls in and needs Calhoun for a secret mission, right? She's kind of like his secret mission admiral. So, he's got to go to the secret mission. Someone's got to be in charge of the Excalibur. Riker's already there. Riker has, experience dealing with the Romulans. Boom. She puts him in charge. Shelby is like, she's got a stress ball. Getting too excited. I'm getting too excited here, guys. Right. Shelby's got a stress ball, and she's squeezing it so hard, she, explodes it out of her hand, which is something that Calhoun's not been able to do in all the time that he's had the thing. So, someone turned out the lights. Hang on. We're back. Okay. So anyway, now you have this very fun dynamic in the story. And Riker and Shelby always butted heads in that two-parter Best of Both Worlds. So now this is expanded upon more. And then they throw in it's like Riker the straight man getting thrown into this very strange ship, which is the Excalibur, right? It's a very strange crew. They all have their own little quirks, and it's kind of run in its own strange little way. So you have this very fun, several scenes of Riker interacting with the crew and kind of wondering what in the heck is going on with them, right? And then him having to be explained things, and then also just kind of seeing and learning things, especially with the navigator McHenry. I like his character especially, who sometimes will appear to be completely asleep, but is absolutely totally dialed in. So, and there's just so many little examples of that. The very first basically thing that happens when he comes on board the Excalibur or takes command is that he has to wrestle Janos, which is the Mugato crewmate they have, and Burgoyne, who are doing a training session. So it's very good, very good comedy, especially if you know the New Frontiers crew, and if you don't, you should get to know them, because it's a very fun ride, and I can't believe how much it goes on for. There's so much New Frontier stuff yet for me to read, and that is not even part of the Peter David book trek this summer. So anyway, going back to Zolan Darg, he makes a new friend, a sharpshooting, straight-shooting guy named Quint, who immediately kind of, I guess, falls in with him and is able to actually kind of save him from a little bit of trouble that he gets into. So they become pretty good friends. This is kind of the book that keeps on giving. Then you have a fun little chapter or little scene where Calhoun gets his papers. He knows what he's got to do, and then he goes to meet up with Starfleet's Q. If you're familiar with, Star Trek's Q, Starfleet's Q. Like the guy from Bond who makes all the gadgets. So this guy gives Calhoun some pretty fancy gadgets. He's got a hologram emitter that makes it so there's multiple versions of him kind of running around, a la like Total Recall, you know. And then he's got a transporting thing that makes him transport 10 feet in whatever direction he specifies, right? That's pretty good. He's got a phaser in his shoe. He's got an explosive device planted into his scar that he can pull out and blow up people with. I think there was a ring. Maybe the ring was the hologram thing. Or that was in his tooth. I don't know. He had all these cool devices when he was sent out into the field, right? So anyway, that's when my notes ran out. I took notes through like chapter 7, and then I just was like, I was all up in the book, and that was it. So then I just made some scribbled notes here in the end. So as we go to the conclusion of this wild ride, things may get out of order or backwards or incorrect completely. Who knows? We'll see. But Riker's in command of the Excalibur. Calhoun punches Jellicoe in the face, makes kind of a spectacle. That way he can get himself ingratiated with General Thal. Now, General Thal is this Thelonian, kind of important figure, important enough to be invited to, Federation events and stuff. And they want him to get close to him because they think that he is onto something. He's doing something bad, right? So anyway, he buddies up with him, and he kind of gets in with him, and there's some scenes where he's helping him out with his different stuff. And that's where he also meets up with his General Thal's, like, there's a lot of this that reminds me of like a James Bond thing too, because you got General Thal, who's like the big villain of it, right? And then he's got his deadly sexy lady, assistant lady, and that is I wrote it down, Varasindra, right? And she is a not a Thelonian, but she's red. She's a red lady. She's bald and she's red and she's very attractive, so much so that they make a point every time of when she's like around, Calhoun gets like distracted. He's like, whoa, I gotta focus. What the heck is going on? So you get the idea that there's something more kind of going on there too, right? There's a lot of interesting stuff that goes on with her too. So anyway, yeah, they all kind of meet up and they get into his good graces enough to eventually get invited back to, and I'm going to skip over some things here, but they eventually get invited back to his home base. And they get there and there's nothing there, and then it decloaks and it's this massive Dyson sphere that he calls the Thal sphere, right? So they go into the Thal sphere, and this is where the finale of the book is going to take place here. So when they get there, the grand plan is finally revealed, and basically what it is they are going to use what the hell is that thing called? The Omega-9. All right, so the Omega-9, the supercomputer, it can interact with multiple computers if you have a good enough person to run it, right? So they found this race that is basically kind of like a liquid metal race, and they convinced one of them to run this machine for them. And Darg's master plan is basically and you know what, this is kind of weird. This book reminded me a lot of the Picard Season 3 ending, because they use the replicators in this book. Well, his plan was to use the replicators to spread the virus to the entire Federation at once. Since the entire Federation is kind of uniform in all of their technology, they would all have the same replicators. They could use the Omega-9 and this liquid metal Terminator dude, and they could spread that virus throughout the whole Federation. Bing, bang, boom, the Federation is wiped out. And he's perfected this virus because he's had, 4 books before this to get to the perfect virus. So that's the plan. But now, also the freaking, just the overconfidence of villains is fantastic too. The whole time, General Thal knew that Mackenzie was a spy. So after he reveals the grand plan, this kind of big thing, then he says, "Get him, boys!" and they arrest him. And then when they arrest him, that's when Mackenzie, well, actually a few scenes before this, but Mackenzie meets Quint. And who have we been missing this whole time in this book? Who is Quint? It's none other than Jean-Luc Picard, with a beard. I think he's got a beard on. Anyway, that's Quint. And I mean, I kind of knew it. I kind of knew it going in there. I think I wrote somewhere in here. Who is Quint? Picard? Double question mark. I did. I wrote that. Anyway, so I knew it. And there was a lot of these little things. So I'm like, oh man, that's going to happen, isn't it? And it was fun when it did happen anyway. So anyway, now Quint and Picard. No. Picard is Quint and Quint is Picard. But now they are both captured. Basically, they do the old. So many good tropes in this too. So anyway, the overconfident villain, and then they do the trope of. So they got Calhoun, and they're like, all right, we got to kill Calhoun. All right, Quint, get over here with your gun, and you shoot him. And then Picard's like, got the choice. He's like, all right, what do I do? Do I shoot him so I can stay here and complete the mission? Or do I save him, and then we fight? And like, how can I do that right? And he's like, and of course, he chooses not to shoot him. He rushes over to Thol, and he puts the gun to his head, only to find out that the gun is empty. It has no juice. No juice to fire, the classic trick, the empty gun, just to kind of see what the guy would do, right? So anyway, now they're locked up. They're locked up in the brig. They got 2 guards on them, and Calhoun's like, well, when I get out of here, guys, I'm going to have to kill you first. And the guards are laughing. They think that's hilarious. And that's when he enacts his array of spy gadgets. And he transports out of the cell, kills both the guards. Like, I think they say within 4 seconds, both the guards are dead. Oh man, there's so much other stuff I've got to talk about in this book. We're just going to run through the conclusion here now. Anyway, so they're able to break out. Vera Sidra, she comes in at the end. She was going to break them out. And then it's revealed that she is actually Vandalia, the Orion that he rescued earlier in the story, right? And then she basically changed her color, shaved her head, and then took on the service under the Zolan Darg, to keep safe from... took on service under General Thol to keep safe from Zolan Darg, who didn't even recognize her when the time came, right? So, interesting little story there, how that all turned out. Doesn't turn out good, though, for her in the end. In the escape attempt, she's confronted by Darg, who I think recognizes her at that point, and then does blast her and kill her, unfortunately. And then the dirty dude he records her last words so that he can play them back to Calhoun when he comes upon her dead body. Like, that's some dastardly. That is dastardly. The dude he's very dastardly. So anyway, they are now in the process of escaping, right? They're escaping, the guards are chasing them, they've all become separated. So now each of them has their own little special mission. Picard, he goes to the lab to find the virus, to find the cure. There is no cure, but he does take a sample of the virus as kind of a way to, maybe they can find a cure for it, right? But then he, eventually, after some, that comes up later, Mackenzie, he goes after the, basically after the cloak. But then his big fight at the end is with Zolan Darg, who is revealed to have a complete robot body. Basically, only his head survived the beginning of the story being crushed by the tower. So he's got this full-on robot body. So you have this just as fantastic couple of final chapters with Picard and him racing through the sphere, and then him using his little gadgets to kind of save the day at the end, and the very end, how they save the day is pretty good too. He's down, like, rather right at the core of this thing, and that's where the cloaking device is here too. So as he's battling with the robot Zolan Darg, he puts his transporter thing onto him and says transporter right, which then transports Darg right. But the transporter doesn't realize walls and anything, so it transports the dude right into the core of the warp core, which then starts to explode. So now the whole base is exploding. Mac is trying to get away, trying to find the launching pad. Meanwhile, Picard, he gets into trouble with General Thol, and then they start duking it out, right? And then Picard's got that vial of stuff, it falls out on the ground. General Thol falls backwards on it in the battle, and then he succumbs to his own double helix virus in the end. Very cool ending. Not the ending yet, though. Anyway, mad dash for the exit. Picard thinks that he is dead, but Mackenzie has managed to call his shuttle, which is he can actually like basically like yell out to it, which he does, and it kind of comes and it rescues him, brings him in, and then he beams Picard out at the very last moment, only to find out that their shuttle has been completely drained of power, and now they're basically kind of sitting there left to die, and Picard's going through like, he's like, what are you thinking about? Or Calhoun's like, what are you thinking about? And Picard goes through all these things he's thinking about as they're going to die, and Calhoun's like, well, I'm thinking I wish the Excalibur would drop out of warp and rescue us right about now. And bing, bang, boom, there it does. So I missed a whole storyline about how the Excalibur was powered down by the... Oh, man, there's so much. There's so much, but I can't go back. I can't go back. We can only move forward. That's the ending. The ending is actually kind of funny. They end it with a trick that they played on Burgoyne, basically making him think that he is pregnant, which is kind of a trick that they played on McHenry in a previous New Frontier book. So it ends on a light joke with a light note with a joke. And the book itself teased and teased and teased what happened in the past. Thal was always like, you killed my son, Jean-Luc Picard. So the final book in the Double Helix saga is obviously going to go into the past and delve into that, which is kind of a strange ending, right? So I feel it's like, well, I'm prejudging. Let's just stay where I'm at right now. This book was awesome, and it was a ride, and it was fun, and I'm glad that I sat down today. I actually did. I sat down and I said, I'm going to sit here, and I'm not going to get up until I finish the book. Somehow I was able to do that, thankfully, and I did it, and it was a good ride to the end. So very exciting. Looking forward to jumping into this and giving it a. I'm going to give it like a really, really, really good shot of big reading, right? Because I want to get into the Peter David book trek. So that's where we're going to go from there. That's enough for now about Double Helix. Read it if you got it, and if you don't, then listen to me talk about it. As always, live long and prosper. See you guys in the next one.